Meanwhile, the fight to retake a key Iraqi city from ISIS is intensifying at this hour. The Iraqi army moved into the city of Fallujah yesterday, but ISIS fought back with sniper fire and explosives. Fallujah lies just west of Baghdad, and ISIS has controlled it for 2 years. The city is still home to thousands of civilians, which makes this battle far harder and more complicated. CBS News foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata is in London with more. And again, Charlie, with the battle for Fallujah now in full swing again today, what's the latest there?
Well, Iraqi commanders, people in charge of the offensive for Fallujah, say that they are still making progress on 3 sides. They're closing in on Fallujah. It's worth pointing out they haven't entered the city itself. It's a huge area when we talk about Fallujah. When we get to the city center, it's a different thing. According to them, they've been able to get to the suburbs. But today, ISIS fighters launched their largest counteroffensive since the assault to take Fallujah began a week ago. A commander there said something like 100 ISIS fighters came at them. They were heavily armed. They were able to suppress the advance of the ISIS fighters with the help of air cover, most notably from the U.S.-led coalition and Iraqi forces. And although it was a setback, they said it was a temporary setback. They said they killed something like 75 ISIS fighters, and they're continuing their push. So they are making an advance toward Fallujah, but they're finding resistance the closer they get to the city center itself.
And Charlie, you have reported from the front lines in Iraq, but I mentioned those thousands of residents still in the city itself. What impact does their presence have now on this offensive?
Yeah, Josh, you know, that's the big difference. We covered the offensive in Sinjar a few months ago, and that place was a ghost town. I mean, we watched from a hillside as, you know, U.S. warplanes just pounded that area because it was essentially virtually empty except for the ISIS fighters in there. Fallujah is an entirely different story. There are tens of thousands of residents that are still there, and they're trapped. Now, when we went to Fallujah a few weeks ago, the Iraqis weren't advancing then, but we weren't seeing a flood of refugees coming out either, and the reason is ISIS controls the roads leading out of the city, and they're stopping residents from fleeing. There are even reports that they're trying to corral them toward the city center, use them as human shields against the ground offensive and these airstrikes. So it's a much different story than some of the other cities that we've seen where the Iraqis and especially the Peshmerga have had great success in clearing those areas out. Fallujah is going to be tough.
And obviously the refugees that do escape will need help. To that end, what is the United States' role in this fight?
Well, I mean, you know, you spoke to the U.S. military in Baghdad yesterday. We asked, of course, if there was an uptick in the number of airstrikes in Fallujah, and he said yes. There have been, significantly. And he described it as deliberate airstrikes and dynamic airstrikes. Deliberate airstrikes is where you've selected the target, and when the time is right and it's right to hit that target, that's when you go after it. Dynamic airstrikes are different. This is when you've got ground forces that are moving in. ISIS fighters will expose themselves, they'll get out of their fighting positions, they'll move around the battle zone, and that's when aircraft in the air are able to target them in sort of real time. So this is an active war zone. At the same time, they're trying to do what they can to avoid civilian casualties. But again, this is a very congested, controlled area. It's tough for refugees to get out of Fallujah. The UN says that they're doing what they can. They're expecting tens of thousands of people to flee at some point. And they have got camps set up, they've got water and food, but really they're just waiting for the flood of residents to arrive. It just hasn't happened yet.
As one aid group again had said, they really see a human catastrophe in this town as a result of the offensive to retake Fallujah. Charlie D'Agata in London, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, Josh.